What would you do if he was your stud running back last year, and that was like, and then you've kind of crept into contending status? Asking for a friend, by the way.
I'd still move him because, I hate running backs in Dynasty. I think that this is peak value. Go move him for still an elite guy and try to get like a running back too, a low end. Like when you're looking at that, I mean, he's getting, I know I'm going to probably, we're going to talk about it, but I think J.K. Dobbins should be ranked higher than Tony Pollard in Dynasty, but he's not being ranked like that. So if you can maybe pivot off of that, maybe get Dobbins plus something else, that's how I would attack that.
Yeah,
that's fair. I like that.
See Dobbins give a running back one season before.
I don't need to hear this slander. What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Show, we'll be talking vulnerable running back assets, going through all across the training camp battles and talking about in Dynasty, that running back position can be volatile. Now, first one on the board. Can Ken Walker be a top 12 Dynasty running back with Zach Charbonnet looming? What does that look like? Right now, Ken Walker's running back 9 in Football Guys Dynasty rankings. Charbonnet's at running back 20. Jeff, what are we doing with this one?
Yeah, he absolutely can be. And, part of it is the changing landscape within the running back landscape. And so when you're looking at more committees kind of going around, coming in, what means a top 12 running back is going to change naturally because you're going to see less bell cow usage. But the thing with Walker is we've seen the explosive plays ability. And so if he's bringing that explosive ability, he can deliver and give you that scoring, as well as he's coming in as the most experienced back in that backfield, the trusted back in that backfield. And I've changed my mind on this early on. I thought that this was going to be a little bit more of a straight up committee, but I do think it's going to be a little bit more of a 70-30, 60-40 type split, especially early.
Yeah, I think that's the key early. I am curious to see how the high value touches go. We've discussed before the ability of Zach Charbonnet to catch passes is fine. The ability for Ken Walker to catch passes is also fine. And then which way do they go on the goal line? I think those two things are super critical in determining if Ken Walker can be a top 12 guy. To me, I think Charbonnet just caps his ceiling. I think he can still be a top 12 guy. But I think it's more like 9 through 12. But when you look at the running back landscape, like Jeff said, I think that warrants maybe a top 12 ranking in Dynasty.
Look at you guys coming on my side of the train with Ken Walker. I've been there. I was there. I just wrote a crowded running back room for the Seattle Seahawks for Football Guys on the website. It's going to be coming out here. And the thing that you looked at, and I'm glad Christian talked about the red zone. Like last year, they finished 9th in points, but they ranked 28th in red zone conversion rate. And when you're looking at that, they left a ton of points on the field out there, especially from the rushing attack. And now some people said they brought in Charbonnet for that red zone. So that's one of those things to kind of note, like, if it is Charbonnet getting those touches, then yeah, we'd be a little bit more concerned. I do, from all the stuff, the reports that I've seen from beat writers that are out there, they've talked about it's Walker's backfield. And Charbonnet, they've even said Charbonnet's battling DJ Dallas is like the receiving back and kind of there. And you are going to see Charbonnet get those touches, but there is talk about DJ being kind of a pain in some of these sides for the Charbonnet owners from the beat reporters, not Christian. He's shaking his head at me already, but I do think it's that. So I think it's a 1A to 1B. But Walker's a 1A to me. But I look at like Charbonnet as like A.J. Dillon, like to Aaron Jones almost. But the difference in Dynasty is that both these guys are young. Walker, they're just the same age. Walker came out, when he came out, he's 22. Charbonnet's 22. So I would rather have the better player, which I think is Walker.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that it's all been baked into the cost because Walker, if they had not added Charbonnet, we'd be talking about a top 5. Can Walker be a top 5 Dynasty running back or even higher? And so now you're kind of to peel it back and to even be a little bit concerned on hitting that valuation where he's sitting at RB9 or being in an RB12. It's already kind of hung in there. And so that's, and then just who else is knocking on the door to really break down and to be that top 12 Dynasty running backs.
Yeah. The last caveat that I want to throw in there is they also drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba this year. They still have Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. They've got a lot of weapons and a lot of mouths to feed. I think there will be some disappointing weeks from Ken Walker, especially in this 2023 season with that whole slew of guys. But I think when you look at long-term outlook, when you get a 22, 23-year-old running back that's in a high-powered offense that will be scoring points, I think that's exactly what you're looking for in your dynasty running backs.
Yeah, and one other caveat: the offensive line was not that great last year. They did okay. Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas definitely outperformed what they thought they were. But even in our power rankings here at Football Guys, we have them in the bottom half, especially in all categories. They gave up 46 sacks last year. So when you're thinking of rushing status, they might want to lean on that rushing attack, kind of protect Geno a little bit, be more efficient. But that is kind of how we're looking at the Seattle Seahawks backfield. We're all in on Walker. I like that. See, Christian, I knew I'd get you. All right, so before we move on, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with your question, recent trades, or thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, also make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content for less than $15 monthly or $70 annually. Everyone who purchases a Football Guys subscription has 30 days from the date of purchase to request their money back if they are unsatisfied, but you will not be. Join us today.
All right, let's dive into Jacksonville. So we're going to go through Jacksonville Jaguars right now. We have our resident Tank Bigsby truther on the show. That is Christian Williams. And then me and Jeff kind of in the middle. So Travis Etienne right now is getting valued as running back 10 in Dynasty. And then you have Tank. He's at running back 33 right now on our Football Guys rankings. What are we doing with this backfield, Christian? Or how are we looking at it heading into the season?
So I think, we just talked about what you're looking for in a dynasty running back, and Travis Etienne hits a lot of those metrics. I am currently working through a Travis Etienne spotlight where I talk about how for redraft this year, I think he's a bit overrated. When you look at a lot of the splits with James Robinson and without James Robinson, you get kind of excited about Travis Etienne. He was much better without James Robinson on a points per game basis. However, some of the efficiency came down. When you look at Doug Peterson's, nature, he likes to implement committee backfields. One of the stats that I'm putting in this article, last year, Travis Etienne had 251 carries. The average RB1 for a Doug Peterson offense gets 193 carries. So he is way above expectation when you talk about what Peterson traditionally likes to implement. And then they went out and got Tank Bigsby. And so when we're talking about a vulnerable running back asset, I think when you look at the price of Etienne in startups and even in trade valuations, I don't think a lot of that risk is built in, especially when you factor in that, we don't know if Etienne is going to be that passing down back. We don't know if he's going to be the goal line back even because of some of his inefficiencies between the tackles. So I think this is one where, I'm a little cautious around Travis Etienne right now.
I think so much of it really in dynasty theory, dynasty thought about the thing you need to consider is probably the person highest in your league has Travis Etienne on their team already. Two, I think that there was a window right when Tank Bigsby was drafted or when we saw Dearness Johnson added to the backfield where everyone was convinced that it was going to be Etienne's backfield. I think now the narrative has kind of caught hold and people have caught on to that Doug Peterson has run a committee in the past, that you're kind of in a place that I think it's hard to move off of Etienne unless you do see that dominant usage. And it's one of those things, you're invested in him now, you almost have to hope to that, because to move off of him would be to admit that you don't believe that's going to happen, which is a red flag when you're talking about dealing with your other managers in your league, looking for that other person that might really still be a Travis Etienne believer. But I think that we're all kind of landing in a similar place with Doug Peterson's usage of committees in the past with some of the comments around there. But it is interesting to know that as the beat has gotten plugged in there again, it's kind of sounding a little bit more like that Seattle situation where they're expecting to be a little bit more of Etienne's backfield and Bigsby, as much as they like him, to have to work his way in and get a bigger role.
I think my concern in this offense is adding Calvin Ridley is going to take away some of these targets from the running backs, but also I think they're going to be more pass heavy. And I think they were really pass heavy last year. I think they're going to be even more. I mean, why wouldn't they? They have Trevor Lawrence ascending. You have Kirk there. You have Ingram. You have all those guys stepping up, even Zay. And then now, where are those passing targets going to come from? So they're going to have to be efficient with them. We all know that Etienne's not as good as a pass catcher as people think that he is. So will those go to Tank? And then here's the other question. Does Tank get the red zone work? Will Tank get that red zone work? And if he does with a higher passing offense, where does Etienne's volume come from? Like, will it be that high enough for him to kind of return on what you drafted him as, right? I think that is, the biggest question mark there. I never had Etienne at cost because, on my dynasty teams, I just never had him there, just based on builds that we like to build. But I would much rather have Tank, probably just from a value standpoint, if I'm doing drafts. Now, if you have Etienne, you hope that, we're all wrong and he gets all that usage and we see it there. But I really think it's just going to be a volatile touchdown market base, like on both of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, too, if Tank is to get the goal line work, that's not a foreign thing in Doug Peterson offenses. I don't know if you guys remember back in the Eagles days when it was a constant poach of the backup running backs going down and getting the touchdowns. And so I don't think that they hate JaMychal Hasty either. I wouldn't be shocked if he's involved in some form or fashion. And so a lot of last year for Etienne was based on usage. And so if we don't see that usage, what is that outlook,
Yeah, fantasy players need to remember how frustrated we got with Miles Sanders and where Miles Sanders was valued as a dynasty asset. You flash back to 2020. I mean, he was going in the first round of startups sometimes. And so that frustration around those years with Doug Peterson, and then Travis Etienne finds himself in that spot.
And I think we got ahead of ourselves a little bit with them trading James Robinson last year because we thought, Etienne took it over, whereas we've seen James Robinson fall off from just a market and value and just obviously like from a football player because of that injury. I think maybe that had to do with it. All right, let's jump over to Minnesota. We have one guy to talk about, Alexander Mattison. So, when you're looking at this, when Dalvin Cook missed time in the 2020 year, that's when Mattison really kind of, shot up. So he posted 5 games with at least 23 touches. And over that stretch, he averaged 23.7 PPR points per game. So everybody kind of assumed he was going to be the next guy up. Then last year, Dalvin Cook did not really come off the field. And Mattison wasn't really that big of a, didn't really get the uses that we saw. So what are we going into this year in that Minnesota offense? They drafted Jordan Addison. We obviously know they have Justin Jefferson, but nothing back there. I see everybody's across the board here. Some people think Madison's a shoe-in, running back 2, maybe with some running back 1 ceiling play. Where are you at with Mattison, Jeff?
I'm higher than consensus, to be honest with you. It's just so hard because the range of outcomes is so wide because you look at the usage that he got in those games that Dalvin Cook was out. Well, who was behind him? 1, and then 2, they're stepping into a game plan that is used to using Dalvin Cook in that bell cow role, and you're just not going to dramatically shift the usage in that type of game plan for 1 off or 2 off weeks where Dalvin Cook is nursing that shoulder injury that we saw him dealing with so often. And so that is my hesitation on Mattison. That being said, if he is in that role, I mean, he's going to smash this valuation that you're sitting with, this RB37 on him, because the value is going to be so high. I do think that Minnesota offense is going to be very productive. And so they're going to be scoring quite a bit. And so that's going to put him in position to be in the red zone, to be scoring touchdowns, to getting some passing game work. That being said, there's also the other alternative where Ty Chandler sees more work, where Kenneth Walker sees more work, and it does turn into a committee where they've had a full off season of it planning on being that committee, and they lean a lot harder. And so that's what makes Mattison so hard to value. But it's one of those things that as that caution comes in on that, he has a lot of room to outperform his current valuation.
Yeah. So with Mattison too, I think, this is very fresh. Dalvin Cook, just recently kind of got cut. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the Vikings GM, is very analytically driven. He, if he were on fantasy football Twitter, he would be talking about, how you shouldn't pay running backs, right? We're kind of getting to the point as we approach training, or the heat of training camp, where some of these free agent running backs are going to start to find homes. And if we talk about vulnerable running back assets, I don't know that Mattison is even going to be the starter there this year. I think there are a lot of really talented running backs out there on free agency that will be looking to find a home, and they're realizing that they're not going to make as much money as I think they wanted, right? So that could be a situation where Kwesi goes out and he gets Ezekiel Elliott, and then they just throw him in the Dalvin Cook role, and Mattison gets, maybe it is more of a committee because it's not Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook could also come back to Minnesota, and then we're talking about RB37. What are we doing with Mattison? That's still a high-value injury replacement, but it's not for me. I don't think I have too many shares of Alexander Mattison. I don't think I will.
I think the question comes down to okay, so if you have Mattison, are you selling him now or are you waiting? Because if they don't sign anybody, he'll probably fall into a pretty good value. So if you're a contender, you probably roll, because if you think you can just get running back 2 volume production this year and you probably didn't pay a premium for him, then you probably take that. Or do you hope he gets that, then you can ship him off for maybe a first or whatever, because you're not getting that right now. Because I do think that there's that presumption by a lot of people out there that they are going to kind of fill in there. So for me, like if I have him and I'm a contender, I might ride it out, because I think that if he can have that, production's there. But if I'm a tweener or if I'm a fraud and I know my team's kind of a fraud, you might want to get out a little earlier or after those first couple games when you see him maybe kind of have 20 carries, 25 carries, and then you can maybe ship him to somebody that is a contender.
Yeah, and that's a really key point on it, that most holding in him in Dynasty didn't pay this freight for him.
Yeah.
This is a great deal on it. And so when you see, and I think that there's a pervasive mindset in Dynasty that when you see this type of thing happen, there's a whole bubble of excitement around that, because, hey, I've got a found asset. Oh my God, I've got a RB1 that was this guy on my bench that I was waiting to happen for multiple years. But to be able to flip and turn that around, one, I think that if you have Mattison, you probably should be prodding. You probably should have immediately, the day that Dalvin Cook was cut, you should have offered it for a first to your entire league. And if you have that one person that's going to bite on that, then that's the time that you made that deal. But I think that enough concern about the other pieces, like Christian mentioned, that might be available, or the potential different committee usage has creeped in. Kind of reality has set in on that. And so, Kevin, you're exactly right. You'd need that workhorse role early, and if you see that and you see sitting at RB5 through the first couple weeks, then that's the time to make the move.
Yeah, I'd go grab Dwayne McBride. That's kind of who I would be targeting as a deep guy, and just take him, see if you can get him that value return. All right, let's jump over to the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know who's a Cowboy fan on this show. Get off the show. But let's go to Tony Pollard, running back 12. And I'm going to just blame Jeff. Jeff is really going to get blamed for this ranking at Football Guys, because he is exceptionally high on Tony Pollard. I don't know if he's that high, but he's definitely high. But let's talk about Brian Schottenheimer came in, runs the Air Coryell system based off power run and deep play action. So we've seen that. Usually it's 11 personnel scheme, though. Mike McCarthy, my favorite guy out there, he favors that West Coast. He likes the quick passing, 21 personnel. What do we expect from this offense, Christian, with Pollard here? Like, do you think he can get featured? There's no one else behind him. Like when we're talking about Malik Davis, Ronald Jones, Deuce Vaughn, Little Deuce, there's no one really where we're like, oh my gosh, you're going to take usage from him. But can he be a feature guy?
That's the question, right? That is the question with Tony Pollard, because last year he didn't even play 50% of snaps. He was still very much so in that committee with Zeke. And for all the trash that Zeke gets, he was a carry eater. He was a guy that could go between the tackles. He would take on hits. He would take a beating, so that Tony Pollard could be used where he's best, which is out in space and out, able to get to the outside. And so when you look at what this system has traditionally been with Brian Schottenheimer, you're not really excited about Tony Pollard running between the tackles all that much. And so it's kind of one of those situations where he doesn't really fit what they're looking for. He's on a franchise tag. And so when we're talking dynasty value, even if he does go out there and perform, maybe they do tailor the scheme a little bit to him this year. We're at a situation where he's been franchise tagged. He might get tagged again, but I don't know if that's a route that they would go. And then they've shown that they don't want to pay running backs now, or maybe they've learned that they shouldn't pay running backs now. And then the other component to this is Ezekiel Elliott is best friends with Dak Prescott, and he does not have a home yet. And I would not be shocked if they brought him back. He takes a massive pay cut, and we're back in the same situation, but the dynasty value for Pollard completely flipped, whereas then Zeke becomes the value. So it's a whole lot of questions around this that it makes me a little worried to draft him in startups. And then, if I'm a contender, I don't know that I'm taking that risk with this new system.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see with the addition of Bijan Robinson into the league and what Pollard's skill set is kind of what running backs should be pushing for. The way we talk about running back contracts would be viewed as an offensive weapon. And I think Pollard has that skill set, the ability to contribute in the passing game. Now, if Schottenheimer's offense is what they're really running, you're not going to be using that a ton off play action, because the way play action is set up to work, Dak Prescott's back is going to be the defense as they have that play action. He's going to flip around and he's going to be looking vertically to the great wide receivers that the Cowboys do have. And so what kind of marriage between the two systems, and are they going to use Pollard in that role? Because if I'm Pollard, I'm pushing hard for that, because that's going to be my path to hitting value within the free agent market. I think that we've seen running backs that do have passing game utility, Jahmyr Gibbs going in the top 12 in the draft, and that type of that is what you want your argument to be if you're a running back, that I am a major contributor to the passing game. The concern is that if they are more power focused, it's just not what Pollard's set up to do. And I don't know that I have faith in the coaching staff there to fully utilize the talent that is there, to be honest with you.
Pollard, to me, and just as a Dallas fan, so I will take that with a caveat. I like Pollard, but he'll never be, his price will never be higher than it is right now. His price is never going to be from a dynasty value. So look at your roster and understand where that roster is, because if you think you can go for it, maybe, but I have real concerns with him holding up. I really do have concerns with him being able to put in a full usage in the system. And I don't think it's going to be a very efficient system. I think Dallas's offense is not going to be as good as people are projecting it to be. You could say what you want about Kellen Moore, and I've certainly said a lot, but there's a reason why Herbert just got an extension and they're talking about MVP. It's a lot of it is more because of what he's able to do in the offense. A lot of it was Mike McCarthy's like, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on my own terms, which is going to be 21 personnel, and he's just going to grind it out. And I think Tony, I don't know if it's going to be that grinder, though. I don't see that. And like right now, I really believe you can put Pollard with another asset, like, a wide receiver 2-ish, and go get Stephon Diggs. Go get a guy like a elite wide receiver 1 this year and go try to win it. And you probably have that ability because Pollard probably wasn't a top 2 back on your team. So you can go use him and go get an elite wide receiver. I would do that. That's how I would look at Pollard and try to get that value for him.
What would you do if he was your stud running back last year, and that was like, and then you've kind of crept into contending status? Asking for a friend, by the way.
I'd still move him because, I hate running backs in Dynasty. I think that this is peak value. Go move him for still an elite guy and try to get like a running back 2, a low end. Like when you're looking at that, I mean, he's getting. I know I'm going to probably, we're going to talk about it, but I think J.K. Dobbins should be ranked higher than Tony Pollard in Dynasty, but he's not being ranked like that. So if you can maybe pivot off of that, maybe get Dobbins plus something else, that's how I would attack that.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that.
See Dobbins give a running back 1 season before.
I don't need to hear this slander. Before we continue, we want to tell you about our strategy session giveaway. The 3 of us are committed to helping you win your Dynasty leagues, and we're giving away live strategy sessions to 3 lucky listeners. We'll sit down on a video chat and analyze how we'd approach your Dynasty roster. All you have to do is leave a review for the podcast, take a screenshot of that review, and you email it to me, Coleman@footballguys.com. And hey, that's a heck of a value. We get to sit down with you guys and kind of just go through your Dynasty roster, and it'll be a lot of fun. So go do that. Take a screenshot of that review for the podcast. Email it to me. Of course, I'm the one that they put the email down for, but I am happy for that. You send it to me right away. All right, let's get into Jeff's slander. We're going to the Baltimore Ravens. J.K. Dobbins at running back 17. I think what we're going to be looking at with Dobbins, how valuable is this in this new scheme? So in Greg Roman's scheme, you saw, he played 3 backs. Todd Monken, though, he's Nick Chubb, 80% of running back attempts in 2019. We've seen Todd really do well in that Georgia offense. If you want to go read about that Georgia offense, I wrote a spotlight on Lamar. It does break down their rushing attack and what they will do with them. The problem with Dobbins, as Jeff kind of alluded to, is the injuries that he's had. And I think the big question mark is, will he be able to put that running back 1 season up, and where are we at? So go ahead, Jeff. Tell me your Dobbins hate, and we can just get it out of the way.
Now, as everybody knows, I am the resident Ohio State Buckeye homer, and so the idea that I hate J.K. Dobbins is simply not correct. I'm really very curious on Todd Monken's usage, because when he had Nick Chubb, that was right before they got Kareem Hunt, and they really heavily used Nick Chubb. Well, when we saw him at Georgia, that was a 3-headed committee backfield. And so, and we saw Baltimore make a move, adding Melvin Gordon. And I'm extremely skeptical that Melvin Gordon has very much left in the tank. But what that does tell me, I think that if they were a little bit more open to committee usage, we see this team make an aggressive move on Odell Beckham in free agency and give him more money than, really shocked the market and really kind of reset things with DeAndre Hopkins. I think that if they wanted to go down that committee path, there are good enough running backs, and Dalvin Cook, James Cook, his brother, has connections to Monken playing in that Georgia scheme. And so I think that there probably could have been some things working there if, one, they were concerned with J.K. Dobbins, who obviously is sitting on the pup right now, but two, if they wanted to have more of that committee. And so what that tells me is Dobbins is the core piece there, but we need him to deliver. And we know the way that the running back market is right now. He delivers in that year, and maybe he's kind of similar to the Pollard situation where he's getting hit with the franchise tag because he is going to be a pending free agent. If he does not, then I think that they're going to be dipping into the draft, and that could leave Dobbins really in a very iffy situation on where he ends up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, though, is like, I think he's going to deliver on that season. I do projections for the 2023 season, and when I looked at them and Dobbins came out as a top 12 guy for me, I was like, okay, it's time to reevaluate what I think about him in Dynasty. And I get the concern. We've seen the injuries. He re-injured that same knee last year, and so that put him out until week 14. But then he came back and he was hobbling all over the field, yet still getting behind defenses and still operating efficiently. And so when you factor in that this Baltimore offense is going to be more fast-paced, he's going to be on the field for passing downs, the Ravens will use him in the passing game. And I think that that's something that has gone behind the wayside a little bit because they haven't traditionally, and sometimes that's a quarterback stat. But in this case, it's very much so they scheme up their running backs. And so when you're looking at that roster, I don't think they're scheming Melvin Gordon up. I don't think they're scheming Gus Edwards up. I think, honestly, Melvin Gordon's just a camp body that they hope makes the roster as a nice little depth piece. But I feel very strongly that J.K. Dobbins is going to have one of those years where, like you said, that's the market right now. If he has an RB1 year, we're going to be sitting here next year talking about him as a top 12 asset. Contract aside, that's the other kicker, is he's in a contract year. There's a little bit of a skepticism there, but yeah, I mean, RB17 to me, that's probably a little low, and I actually don't know where I have him ranked off the top of my head, but to me, I think he's got potential to be inside that top 12 come this time next year.
I think him and Pollard could be easily flipped next year. Like, oh, okay, for 12 either. And I think something to point out about this new system, it's not just going to be running back screens where it's just little dump offs. Like they get in motion out. You'll see that in the Georgia offense. They're going to get in there. And if Bateman can't stay healthy, if that wide receiver room takes any hit, Dobbins is going to be that piece for them. They're going to move them around like they did with Kenny McIntosh and those type of guys too. So I do think when you're looking at that, it's going to have that. Also, I want to point out, because I'm the offensive line guy. I don't know if you guys know this on the show, but when you're looking at offensive line for Baltimore, run block win rate ranked first last season, while and their pass block was sixth. But they did very, very good on their rushing offensive line. Obviously, they built their PFF had them at second in overall, and they've improved that. Like you like what you've seen from that, so you love that. You love Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses, those guys. Even Ben Cleveland, he's a veteran. He's going to be there. I think everything is pushing for. If Dobbins is out there, I think he's going to be a top 12 guy. Like that's. But I'm also a Dobbins guy. I think that he's going to definitely be that talented back there. All right, let's go to Los Angeles. Let's talk about Cam Akers. Cam Akers. I was going to say he's yoked right now. If you've seen a picture of him, he put on some muscle this offseason. So when you're looking at that, we have him at running back 21, which I think is fair. I think, with Cam, with the injury and all of that, we talked about his usage last year, the end of 2022 season. But Kyren Williams did out-target him week 10 to 17, 12 versus 10. So when we're thinking of that, is this more of a committee than people realize, Jeff? Or are we on the board for Cam Akers, full usage season?
The way that he was used at the end of last year and the way I've been operating in redraft, and I do think that it's important that when you are looking at Dynasty to kind of operate with the running back position in more of a redraft mindset, just in that position specifically. But in redraft right now, the way I'm operating with Akers is that he's going to be the guy. But I do think that our history together, we are not high on Kyren Williams. That being said, I think that there are certain things he can do in the passing game that the Rams kind of flirted around using last year. And the thing to remember during that stretch when Cam Akers took over, they didn't have Matt Stafford and they didn't have Cooper Kupp. And seeing more usage for Kyron Williams in that stretch, they also didn't have Matt Stafford and also didn't have Cooper Kupp. And so I'm hesitant to strictly go off of what was done last year with Cam Akers when really it was a lost season. They were trying to get through that season. And we know Sean McVay is not going to be afraid that if Zach Evans is having a strong camp or if Williams is showing something, we've gotten the rug pulled out on Cam Akers specifically in this type of situation before.
Yeah, to me, this is one of those. Did he actually learn from what happened to Gurley back in the day? Because I think when you look at the usage since then, since Gurley left Los Angeles, it has been mostly committee. They've wanted to use two backs. Who those two backs are this year, I'm not entirely sure. I also think there's something to be said about, Sean McVay has flirted with retirement now for 2 years. And if they think that they're going to compete this year, they're crazy, first. But second, if they think they're going to compete, they're going to put the best players on the field. Cam Akers, to me, is the best running back that they have. I'm a big Zach Evans believer. I think that he could work his way into this committee. But right now, from what we've seen, Cam Akers knows the system. He operates it well. Is the offense good, though? Like, is he going to be able to score points? Because, we do need some touchdowns for him to return value. And is this offense going to be good past this year? I think, there are a lot of questions about that. And so that's the definition of a vulnerable running back asset is if we have no idea what this offense looks like after this year, I'm not so sure that we should be in on this player.
But the way I also look at vulnerable running back assets, it just depends on what your build is. So if you're winning now, you're a micro asset. Like, okay, I could take Akers this year and I'm all right, we'll roll. Then we'll just figure it out after that. And I do think we've talked about it on this show before. There is when it comes after the season, you can go buy some of these veterans. They're actually a buy season for these guys because people value them so low that you can still retool and rebuild if you miss on a couple of these vulnerable guys or their value kind of shoots out of there. To really go back to Akers real quick, they had over 10 offensive line combinations last year. You'd have to imagine that offensive line is going to be better this year and improved and have that. But also, I think their defense is going to be really bad. I really think they're going to have to put up some points. So I do think that the scripts, and even if it is Akers, we're not talking about passing, and the receivers, I do think they're going to have to give him the ball. I do think just based on their line, and then he will see the target. So I don't mind him, but running back 21 to 16 is probably where he's going to finish unless he just has a bonkers year. But that's still okay value in there. All right, let's go do some rapid fire, and then we'll get out of here. So just have you guys pick rapid fire, Jeff. Don't give me an explanation. So Cincinnati Bengals, do you want Travion Williams or Chase Brown? Who do you think is going to win that battle?
Travion Williams for 2023.
Christian?
Travion Williams also for 2023, but probably 2024 too.
I think Travion's a better football player. I think Chase had a good college career, but I think a little bit high. Travion Williams. New York Jets. Israel Abanikanda versus Zonovan Knight versus Michael Carter. This would be an interesting one. This is actually an extremely fun battle because of what's going on with Brees and his injury. So, Jeff, who are we betting on?
Zonovan Knight, I think so.
Ooh.
I like Zonovan quite a bit.
Okay.
That was shocking. Michael Carter's getting the drumbeat. So, right, in terms of dynasty, Michael Carter doesn't appeal to me. None of these guys do. None is my answer.
All right. I'm going to take Abanikanda just because Abanikanda has been my guy since last year. So Abanikanda, you and me are riding together for about 4 games until Brees Hall becomes running back 1. All right. Philadelphia Eagles. This is an interesting one. DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny took first team snaps today, and then Kenneth Gainwell. So who you going with, Jeff?
Penny, acquisition cost, and just kind of I like that role.
Key point acquisition cost, Rashad Penny. I've been a Rashad Penny believer since he was drafted, so I'm sticking with it.
I'm gonna go Kenny. No,
sorry,
I'm just kidding. I'm gonna go DeAndre Swift. Me and Swift together till the end, holding hands, going down on the Titanic. But I believe in you, Swift. Let's have that talent there. I'm still gonna take him because I do think acquisition cost, sure, but I mean Swift was pretty cheap too this offseason. People aren't believing in Swift that much as well. He bounced up a little bit, but that's it. We went through your vulnerable running back assets here on the first Dynasty show.
Yep. And the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, head to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.